she'll just be like another Dyer, and I want to be clear and candid in saying that's definitely not the case.
Because you don't want to be caught when those streets get closed and the BS that happens down there. What is your message to these venues? Because I think they feel attacked.
I feel like they are being attacked.
You scare me a little bit when you talk about housing options, talking to urbanists and urban planners.
Those who live it, they work in our city, but they can't afford to live in our city.
I want to talk about abortion with you. All right, everybody, my guest today, she's one of the most progressive voices in the state. That's what I would say about you, all right? She has spent 8 years in the Florida House, and today she is the front runner to be the next mayor of Orlando. I've already had a little conversation with her off camera, and I believe there's probably not much we agree on politically. She might disagree, and that's okay. I'm hoping that we can find some middle ground today and get some answers to questions you wanted us to ask. You are the front runner right now for the next mayor of Orlando. You've spent 8 years in the House, okay?
Right.
Let's start with something I think and I know that you and I can agree on. Buddy Dyer has been in office for too long. All
Absolutely.
right? Let's just get this out of the way. Can you give me a number, because you've been a champion for term limits?
Right.
How
Totally.
long is an Anna Eskamani mayor, how long are you staying in office for? What's a cap, in your opinion?
I love this question. I would say no more than 12 years, which is 3-4-year terms. And the reason why I say that is a decade feels like a good amount of time to accomplish your goals. If you haven't accomplished your goals in a decade, then you're doing something wrong. But I served, as you mentioned, 8 years with term limits, and we've done a lot of work in 8 years, and we built a lot of friendships and relationships across the aisle, across the state, across the country. So 8 years is a good amount of time to do what you got to do. And so I have on my website, I'm very clear about this on term limits.
All right, so we're looking at, we can do a hard cap at 12 years. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Okay.
And, to your question, we need the council to vote on this. So I actually really want to make sure that we have that vote. And you have council members who have way beyond served 12 years as well. And it's important that it does not just apply to the mayor, that it applies to the entire council. And you look at any board of directors, board of trustees, shareholder board, they have term limits. They have turnover. And there's a reason for that, because you got to make sure things don't get stale. You have to make sure there's new ideas at the table. And we all know the difficulty of incumbency, of challenging an incumbent. And so you have this unfair advantage, whether it was earned or not. And again, term limits just kind of creates some equity and some fairness in that process.
Yeah, I've been very critical of Buddy Dyer on this show. If you see any of my content, I think, though, here's my opinion, because I got this question today from some guys over at Lockheed Martin. It was actually a direct message. They asked me, they said, when do you think things kind of went downhill? What was the turning point for Orlando? And I want to talk about that more broadly, because for me, I think that what you just said resonates. When you stay at a place for too long, you tend to get complacent.
And comfortable.
Yeah. Like you said, there's turnover on boards. There's turnover when I have a marketing company. People turn over marketing companies because they get complacent.
Totally.
And so when you have somebody who's in an incumbent position where they have an advantage when it comes to an election by name recognition alone, it's very difficult to move them out of that office when they don't want to leave or they're not termed out. I've said before that if we want to talk about no kings, Demings and Dyer, if you don't have one of those two names, you've really kind of been out of luck. And those have been people that have controlled Orange County and Orlando for a very long time. So I'm very happy. I've voted before on term limits before. It is very important to me that we have a changeover at the top. So I like that. What are your aspirations?
For any Democrat, I am a registered Democrat, though I love to find opportunities to work across the aisle and to be bipartisan, which I've passed bills in the legislature to do that. I've never been the front runner. Like, I've always been the underdog because I don't raise money from the same places other people raise money. I come from an immigrant working class family. I never thought I'd run for office before. And so with that context provided, I think it's really important to not get cocky, right? And so the opportunity to run for mayor has been something that I've been thinking about for a very long time, since really 2020, 2021, because I was thinking of running back in 2023.
Okay.
And I had a conversation with Mayor Dyer about it. And he told me he wanted to run for one more cycle to make it 25 years of service. That would be his legacy. But rumors started percolating once more back in 2024 that despite our mayor's public statements, despite him being very vocal about retirement, he was changing his mind. And he was changing his mind due to special interests in our community that did not want me to run and did not want me to be successful. Okay. And so I share that context because, I know a lot of folks are always curious. It's another Democrat. What would she do differently? Or, folks are like, she'll just be like another Dyer. And I want to be clear and candid in saying that's definitely not the case. And if anything, I have an open door policy. I work with everyone, but you got to be willing to work with me too. And so, part of this past year has also been engaging in conversations with folks that my time in the legislature never once gave me airtime, but now obviously want to connect more intentionally, which I am so open to. I think that's important because their success is our success.
I looked at your experience. Planned Parenthood is a large part of what you've done. You've obviously been in the House for 8 years, but there are going to be people who say you've been a great advocate, but as far as having the experience to manage about $700 million in a working budget and about $1.8 billion that's allocated to Orlando, you don't have that experience. What would you say to that voters like, I don't know, does she have it or not to be able to step into Orlando?
As a state representative, I serve 6 municipalities and Orange County, and they're all politically different. Their budgets are different. The relationships are all incredibly valuable to me. And so a part of that transition is leaning on those experts and leaning on that experience in legislature to help build our city. And it's so important for me to maintain my legislative contacts and friendships, because ultimately nothing we can do in Orlando is done in isolation.
Correct.
We have to work with Tallahassee. And I have been able to get things done and to pass legislation in the super minority. And I look at my Republican colleagues as my friends. I mean, we are so different on many, many issues. But when I gave my farewell address on the House floor, I had a standing ovation from the front row and the back row. And that is so heartwarming to me, because in this polarized environment where there will be disagreement, absolutely, but I've always done my best to separate the person from the politics.
Okay.
So on the just the legislative experience side, it's very complimentary and very translatable. On the executive experience, so when I worked at Planned Parenthood, that was my first job out of college. So that was at this point 2012. Yeah. So I went to UCF, went to Orange County Public Schools, go Knights, charge on. And of course, that was my first job right out of college. And I started at a wee little position, development coordinator. But in those 6-7 years, I became a senior director of public affairs and communications, managing a team of 6 across 22 counties, 11 health centers, 40,000 patients, multi-million-dollar budget. But of course, I think even more importantly in that context, serving as a director over a team. I mean, I've had to hire people, fire people, lay off people. These are the worst parts of being a manager or being a director, but they're essential. Mm-hmm. And those are the same exact skills that, again, I've been able to build over time, because today I serve as executive director of a statewide nonprofit that does voter registration, nonpartisan voter registration on college campuses across the state. Okay. So in addition, I manage 3 full-time staff on my campaign, and I have a full-time day job, because our salary in the legislature is $28,000. It's a part-time job with full-time overtime hours, but I do carry a full-time job. I do nonprofit consulting nationally, and I have a separate team that I work with there. So from my private sector experience to nonprofit to public service, I mean, I would argue that I check off all the boxes when it comes to leading a city with, as you noted, a nearly $2 billion budget. And of course, nothing's done in isolation. When you get elected as mayor, every appointee, which City of Orlando has layers of appointees.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, more than other cities. It's actually quite unusual. But with that said, every appointee has to send you a letter of resignation automatically. And you either accept it or you reject it. And so I also want to, of course, build a team in a very transparent way. I want to make it a participatory experience. When the city of Belle Isle, which is in my district, brought on their new city manager, they actually hosted public forums. They had their 3 finalists and then let the public meet each 3 and do feedback cards and even vote on, who would be, from their perspective, a good city manager. So I want to create participatory experiences in the hiring process to really make sure that we're not just hiring folks that are based on favoritism or relationships or friendships, but really based on merit and based on public feedback.
One of the things about the participatory voting that people have brought up is that when you do that, it tends to make the loudest voice the one that is heard the most, instead of the silent voter that's out there.
Right.
Because if I've got an advocacy group that wants somebody to be hired or otherwise get into a position, I just have to be the loudest one to show up, while meanwhile somebody who might be a little bit more quiet or meager, they get passed over. Is that something you're considering? Because when I hear participatory voting, I think about the loudest person being the one who gets what they want.
That's excellent feedback. And I can tell you my PhD work, I did my dissertation on crisis communications with the unemployment system during COVID-19. And I actually use Reddit as my data source because I think Reddit is such an interesting platform where people are anonymous, so they feel more candid, more free to share. And it really provides like interesting insight from a research perspective, but also from a public servant to really hear what people are saying, what they're thinking. With that stated, your feedback is spot on. You have to diversify how you collect data and how you collect perspectives. One thing that frustrates me about the city today is they do host town halls, they do host community meetings. I mean, I have attended many over the past 8-9 years, and the chief also does his community gatherings as well. But oftentimes there's more city staff than there are residents. And that's really just due to promotion and outreach. So our team, for example, right now we're hosting our legislative library office hours through my legislative office.
Can you do that?
Yeah, it's an annual tradition. Every summer we get out of the office into the community at public libraries, and we invite folks to come with their problems, and we're here to solve them. And, there's a lot of problems out there. And so we don't just like pitch up a table though, Patrick, right? Like, we go door to door. We invite you door to door. We send out a text blast. Like we use our time and resources to make sure that we're not just talking to the same people all the time. And so that's important. And, honestly, even me being on your podcast, one thing that excited me about it was this is going to be a different audience that probably doesn't follow me or talk to me, right? And vice versa. So, and we got to break out of these silos. Like the segmentation of society through especially social media and streaming services. Again, I participate in them, so I get it. But at the same time, it feeds off contempt. Like it feeds off social isolation and negativity. And so you got to get out of that and meet people where they're at. And social media can be a tool to do that. But at the end of the day, you got to get on the ground. You got to meet people belly to belly.
I've talked about it recently on my show. I just think it's highway robbery for the city of Orlando and more broadly for Orange County residents.
Right.
People don't understand that money is not really going back to the city. It's going back to arenas. It's going back to anything that has to do with tourism, advertising. And for me, that advertising one as a marketing guy really pissed me off. Because here's what I look at. Nobody comes to Orlando because of the Visit Orlando advertising. Said nobody ever. No one's got to the room like, you know what? We saw that commercial from Visit Orlando about, I don't know, Fun Spot, and we decided that we were going to come here. You saw a Disney movie, you saw Moana when you were a kid, and you want to go meet Moana, all right? And so what happens is we allocate money over to Visit Orlando, a private organization, makes it sound like it's part of Orlando, but it's not.
Right.
And then they take credit when we have record tourism. They have no part in it, all right? Like nobody is coming here because of their advertising. And so I look at that and I think, okay, this is crap. We have things that need to get done in this city. The $99 million you funneled over into Visit Orlando is BS. That money should be used by citizens who work in those hotels, who actually are sitting behind at the convenience stands at the arena. Those people have been disenfranchised, in my opinion, by a $99 million tax that they don't get to see any part of.
Right.
Because everybody around here knows how many of us go to the theme parks every single week.
Right.
Anybody with a job says never.
Right. Right.
And so, because you can't afford it.
Correct.
So it pisses me off when I see that because I truly believe that Visit Orlando is a sham. Orlando's not seeing any benefit of that.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things me and you I thought could agree on.
Yeah.
$99 million to a private organization with very little oversight seems like a recipe for a little bit of tyranny in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think the concern that you just expressed is one that's shared by many. And when I think about destination marketing, which is what you're describing, I mean, I think we can have a debate over its value, but the real debate is who pays for it. And why do we subsidize private companies and their advertising budgets? Like
give me the money.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's the biggest dynamic, right? Now, I do want to give flowers because there are some phenomenal employees of Visit Orlando that do wonderful work. So I never want to, make broad statements about different entities in our community because there are really good-hearted people. But I think your point around, is this the most fiscally responsible way to spend TDT money? $99 million towards Visit Orlando? I think we can all agree that that is irresponsible. And so one of the bills that we actually supported that Senator Carlos Smith had filed, Carlos Guillermo Smith, would have actually basically said that if you give your tourism advertising entity $50 million, that the rest is loosened. And so that was him trying to say, look, we can still give money to Visit Orlando, just not the kind of money we're giving now. Okay. And then it would loosen the rest of the hundreds of millions. Now, let's just imagine, right? Like if we can actually get this flexibility, what are the things that we could actually pay for? One of the biggest issues I've heard on the campaign trail, and just honestly as a person, as someone who wants this too, is Sunrail to the airport and Sunrail evenings and weekends. Like this has been a common theme of, I want to be able to take the train to the airport. We already have the data that tells us that the Florida Department of Transportation has stated that when we make this connection, we will quadruple the use of Sunrail. It'll just be a major add-on to its use, which it's in desperate need of. We also know that the Orlando airport is ready to take Sunrail. They already have a station built. Yeah, it's on Orlando, right? To get it there. It would cost us only about, I say only because it is a big number, but not in the context, about $400 million to build out that connection. Mm-hmm. TDT generates $385 million. You could take a portion of TDT and bond it out and pay for the $400 million like that. And so I always stress to people that in Orlando, we don't necessarily have a budgetary issue. We have a prioritization issue. And we have folks that are continuously making spending decisions, to your point, that are irresponsible, that feed into legacy industries that don't need the kind of help that they keep portraying that they do.
Yeah, I would have no problem with Visit Orlando if people are coming to Orlando. And I've made this on my show before, if you watch them, is that there's a difference between attractions and Orlando. There's Lake Buena Vista and there's Orlando.
Right. And so we should talk about that too.
So yeah. I want to talk, I got that here, okay? So don't get me wrong. But we talked about it a couple times. Anthony, bring up this budget because this is what I want to look at with you. You're good with numbers. You are better. This right here is what I pulled. Okay. All right. So getting back to it here. We've got a budget.
Oh, yeah. Police and fire. Here.
Yep. Orlando. This is the last fiscal year that we got. I want to focus on our yellow numbers right there because that's going to be where most of everything is going to police and fire that I could find.
Yeah.
What do you like or not like about this budget? I want to leave it open to you. I don't want to ask bullshit leading questions.
Yeah, it's a great question.
What do you like and not like when you look at this?
Well, I like and also expect police and fire to be our most important expenses. Sure. I mean, ultimately, the city of Orlando has we haven't expanded much of the workforce in this current fiscal year, except for police and fire. And as the city grows, the need for our public safety officials only increases. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I know there's rhetoric out there that can be around funding the police and so forth, but you knock on an average door of an everyday resident and they want public safety. Like it is prioritized for them. And I do think it's important that we have top talent in public safety because that's how you prevent incidents from happening. That's how you prevent heartbreaking tragedies that we've already witnessed in our community in the past month, let alone over the years. And so maintaining high quality officers and firefighters, the only way you do that is through a good salary. And we don't want to have our good officers get poached by nearby departments and agencies and organizations. So that in the budget makes sense to me. Like you got to make sure that you are funding it to market value and that you're going to be competitive on those salaries. Now, I will say OPD has also rolled out their mental health program. So it was piloted. Now it's in-house. Mm-hmm. So we want to fund that as well because not every 911 dispatch call should have law enforcement be the first response. Sometimes it is that mental health provider. And I've actually used it before.
The opponents of that would say that you're putting people's lives at risk by having people go to these calls that otherwise might be dangerous. Right. And are we developing a system that could... Well, I'm not putting I think putting people's lives at risk might be a little much, but you're putting people in danger who are not trained to handle something or not able to handle someone who might be violent.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, my understanding is that law enforcement will still be there, but they're not going to be the first person to approach the home or the apartment door and so forth. Okay. So I agree with you. I think you do need to have just in case, right? And you know, now we also have new technologies that are helping to like check out an environment before.
Like drones.
Right, exactly.
It's a great program.
Right, that can just basically check to see what's happening, right? And that can also give dispatchers more details. God bless our dispatchers. I mean, they are the ones who are often making these calls proactively, often with no time to do so. And they don't get the same benefits oftentimes as law enforcement officers on the ground. So I want to give them a shout out. But ultimately, I do think it's important that every case be decided individually. You can't have just one broad approach. The data so far has been really positive. And I try to operate with data. You know, I think it's really important to have dashboards. I mean, we already have the police data initiative, which really provides a lot of great stats FDLE has a lot of great stats. That's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. For us to track data and see what are the crime rates, what are we seeing with police incidences, tragic cases of police brutality. Like, all of this is important to me because I believe firmly that every person should feel safe, regardless of who they are or where they're from. They should feel safe. But again, you can't retain the top talent if you dramatically decrease these budgets. That's also why, we're having the debate on property taxes right now. And so I'm in the process of scenario planning. Like, how do we budget, if we don't have property taxes from homesteaders? We got to prepare for this. Because when you look at this budget that you've shared, I mean, the smallest, and folks should know this, the smallest is housing and community development. And we have an affordability crisis in our community. And obviously some of these other buckets like intersect with housing issues. Like some economic development might encourage some workforce housing, but we are not allocating enough dollars towards affordable housing. We got to beef up those programs to ensure that if you pay taxes in Orlando, you should be able to get your money back in some way. I'm always made this comment that government is very good at taking your money, but government's real bad at giving it back to you.
I would agree with that. Now, Chief Smith has sat in that chair right there, and we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to know with you, let's say Eskamani mayor.
Right.
Chief Smith works, or that position works at the will of the mayor, okay?
Right.
What are your thoughts on Chief Smith's performance? If we're making you, and the Orlando elects you to be mayor, are you keeping Chief Smith on as chief of OPD?
Candidly, knock on wood, I become mayor. These are conversations I have to have with folks of who wants to stay, who wants to leave. With that said, I do think that Chief Smith has done a really, really strong job in violent crime. I mean, that has been his focus, is violent crime. And there has been a lot of conversations I've had with other officers on the community aspect, community outreach. So even though he might not prioritize that necessarily in some of the work that he does in going after violent crime, he does have some phenomenal officers that are community centric. So they're helping when it comes to build relationships with, for example, our young people through Dragon Boat, through late night basketball programs, there's free swim lessons. And so I would say overall that there's been some really, really strong results. And I love to have that conversation of where he sees himself in my administration, because that's important to have that mutual consent. I have no plans of a specific person in that role. And to be honest, Patrick, I don't have a plan for anyone in a specific role because we're still a year out. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but the one area where I think there's been a lot of frustration has been downtown. And, that's a combination of OPD and the city with the funds for after midnight sales and the charging of $3,000 some for our nightlife businesses. That is so excessive. And you're basically, you are bankrupting these businesses because you want them to leave. And I do not support that type of punishment. Like, I think you cannot solve problems through punishment especially with your small businesses. You gotta, obviously if they break the law, that's different. But they're trying to operate a business, and every successful city has a strong nightlife. Obviously a safe nightlife, but a strong nightlife. So I try to be really intentional in working with our small businesses to solve problems, not making them the problem.
Okay.
And I do think that the complaints that have been shared from our small businesses are accurate and important.
I want to go back to Chief Smith here, okay?
Okay.
You've got a guy who's looking after about 1,100 officers.
Right.
They will watch this because I have people, because of my interview with Chief Smith.
Totally.
They're going to be wondering, okay, Patrick, come on. Nail down Miss Eskamani a little bit on this one.
Go ahead.
Because I understand that it's a year out, but if you
Right.
look at Chief Smith and you look at his record right now, you become mayor tomorrow. Are you leaning a certain direction with him and his leadership of OPD? You talked about violent crime being down.
Yeah.
OPD in the city of Orlando has touted other crime statistics being down as well. I've got my disagreements about why that is. Do you lean a certain way right now? If you're not going to give me a yes or no and that you want to speak to him, let's just say he does want to continue to be chief.
Cool. Yeah.
Help me out here.
Yeah.
What are you leaning towards here in your administration?
If that's the hypothetical,
Please.
if you will, then yeah, we need a transitional period. First of all, I mean, if I think it's so important when, especially, we mentioned this earlier about stagnation over 25 years of the same administration. But you also have to be really thoughtful to the power and the importance of institutional knowledge and of transitional opportunities. And so, again, this is a conversation I would want to have with him, but I would assume that he'd want to stay a little bit longer, right?
I do.
And so I would be curious of how much longer so that we can actually plan for that retirement, whatever that is. But yeah, I mean, as I sit here today, I do not have someone, lined up. Now, I will say I've been really blessed to know a lot of local police chiefs who want to meet with me, and a lot of them are former OPD. So don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of other folks that would love to work in that capacity. And so I'm having all those conversations, but I haven't had any yet because I don't want to be premature about it. And I have a great working relationship with the chief, and we talk at least once a week about different issues.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that.
I've had, again, I won't share too many details from a security perspective, but I've had just unfortunately, vitriolic people around me, and I've had active cases with DOJ about direct threats that I've received. So I have personal experience as someone who's gone through those things, but also for my constituents, when I get a tip about illegal activity happening somewhere, I want to make sure that we address it.
Okay.
And that's a combination of multiple actors getting involved because it depends on what the issue is with state government or local government.
Where it is.
Yeah. And so I talked I literally spoke to the chief earlier this week.
Good.
Yeah. So I want to obviously maintain that trust in that relationship. And again, I don't want to ignore those complaints coming from my local businesses about the fact that they pay money for this security and they don't see it, right?
But let me ask you this, because you mentioned the AMS fees.
Right.
We've had Maddie that has been here. I've had others, as we talked about, off camera that have come in here who own other bars and venues downtown.
Yeah.
They hate these AMS fees. And what you've been down there and had these conversations too. For those of you who may not be familiar with Orlando or what happens in the entertainment district,
right.
I think we would agree on this, that if a venue pays for a police officer off duty, which they are forced to do ahead, they can't pay in the rears now. They have to pay ahead of time.
Right.
Which, let me tell you what, when you're running a business, sometimes you are going by week to week, month to month, especially in the beginning. Very difficult to make those payments. But then what these guys are complaining about is not the fact that they have an officer that they're paying for. Okay, if you're going to force me to pay for off duty, we've had to do that before. The problem is that when they pay for this officer to come, that officer is not assigned to the venue that paid for them.
Right.
And so what's happening is that the officer floats, and then they're like, okay, well, listen, if the officer is going to float, then let's make sure that all the loitering, underage drinking, all the vagrancy, all the catcalling, all the stuff that's happening in the streets, if this guy is floating around right now, let's make sure that isn't happening. And so I think where they feel defeated is that they feel like I'm paying into these fees.
Right.
And then the problem is not my venue. It's that someone like Patrick or Anna doesn't want to come to my venue because they don't feel safe when they go downtown.
Right.
And that officer that I'm paying for isn't out there enforcing what they need to make my venue successful.
Yeah.
My direct question for you is this. That's how I feel. And correct me if you feel differently. But my question for you is, you become mayor, and it's an Eskamani administration. Are you getting rid of AMS fees? And how, this is going to be a very broad question, so I hate doing this. We have to fix Orlando, and that is downtown for me.
Totally.
We get sent videos every day, fights that are happening downtown, the violence downtown.
Right.
And someone with their family doesn't want to go down there and have dinner because you don't want to be caught when those streets get closed and the BS that happens down there. I'm a pretty big guy, and I wouldn't want to be down there for some of that crap.
Right.
You've got it. Do you see it, Anna, Miss Eskamani, Representative Eskamani? Do you see it? And what is your message to these venues about helping them be successful small businesses? Because I think they feel attacked.
Yeah, they do feel attacked. And candidly, I feel like they are being attacked 100%. And, kudos to all of our small businesses for continuously working to be collaborative. I mean, they have consistently extended that olive branch, if you will, to try to figure this out. And so I want to give them a lot of credit for that. On the AMS fees, we are not going to keep the AMS fees at $3,000 ahead, and I would like to get rid of them completely. I mean, I'm really curious. I'm assuming that goes in this police budget. I have to double check if they automatically allocate AMS to police, but we cannot be charging our businesses without a direct line of result.
Yes.
And this goes back to data and transparency. Like if you're going to pay anything, you should see the results of it. Yeah. And I actually have done a ride along with OPD from an 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift downtown.
Okay.
And I was with the watch commanders, a little bit different because we were mostly, observing and watching the cops that were on the ground. And I will tell you, sometimes the cops don't feel safe either. I mean, like they're staying in their cars because of potential safety concerns. And so the culture has to change, right? That's a part of it. And I do think that downtown has really struggled from an image issue, like, to the chief's point that the data says the violent crime is down. And the shooting that happened recently between a brother and a sister, very unfortunate. But that was my understanding when I spoke to the chief about it, because I called him and we had a chance to talk about it, it was the first shooting, I think, of this year. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was the first shooting. But then you have that other guy swinging his gun in the trash can situation. So optics is just as important as reality when it comes to politics and when it comes to people wanting to be somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so you gotta deal with both. And I feel like I've almost I'm off task with the question a little bit, but ultimately, working with the small business is going to be key. You cannot make decisions without them, and that's what's happened. If you are going to pay for off-duty officers, they need to be with your property on location, and we also need to enforce the current laws. And when I did the ride along with OPD, we actually did come across what looked like potential underage drinking. I mean, it was one of the girls was on the ground, and her friends were picking her up, and I got worried, so I stepped out to try to help them too. And they were getting a ride, and they were leaving. But I do think that there's more we can do. And again, I want to be careful about the type of approach, because sometimes the intervention is stronger than incarceration on these cases. Like if it's a young person who is engaging in behavior they should not, sometimes it's better to call the parent and get them home versus arresting them. I want to be really thoughtful to the punishment matching the action, if you will. And law enforcement does have the ability to make those decisions, right? To use their best judgment in those decisions. And I also want to trust officers who are well-trained, who know constitutional rights. And again, if we retain the best, then they'll be able to make these decisions. So it is always a balancing act, but ultimately we got to deal with homelessness. Mm-hmm. We got to ensure that the downtown is clean and safe, and we got to provide options that are not just 21 and above. I think that's the other aspect of it too. Because if you're a UCF student at the downtown campus, which is where my program was at Creative Village, and you're not 21, there's not a lot to do. Mm-hmm. And so all these vacant storefronts that we have, it's really important the city prioritize creative ways to fill them. So we're willing to create these huge tax incentive and tax giveaways for large corporations to lure them into our communities, which oftentimes, once those tax incentives are gone, they leave. Yeah. But we're not willing to do that for small businesses. Like, that frustrates me, and it should frustrate anyone. And we've lost small businesses in Orlando, not only because of what's happening downtown and the lack of parking options and lack of public transportation, but also because of construction. I mean, there's been businesses impacted, especially in Ivanhoe Village, for example, that have closed because the construction in the area that was just delayed, municipal construction, roads, right, not private, that they just could not get people into the door. When we go back to how do I measure success, I don't want to measure success by number of ribbon cuttings I go to. I want to measure success and how long does that business actually stay open? How many people do they hire? What are their wages? Like, we should be measuring success based on these everyday quality of life indicators, and that's not what we do, and that needs to change.
Okay. You talk about perception versus the reality.
Right.
I'm going to bring up a scenario I brought up here. For those of you who watch the show will remember this. I've been harping on this revamp of Church Street that they're doing right now.
Yeah.
And on Tuesday was a very good example of perception versus reality. Mm-hmm. You've got a golden shovels going into the concrete type BS, okay? And then, it's such a...
I wasn't invited to that, by the way.
Lord have mercy. But
I didn't find out about it until the morning of.
Yeah, you didn't miss much. All 10 people who showed up. So, but here's what I'm looking at. You've got 10 hours later, you've got a massive brawl right underneath 55 West, which we've shown on this show. Massive brawl.
Right.
Goes on for minutes.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And you have people like, forgive my Shan over District 5.
Commissioner Rose,
Commissioner Rose, who's telling this, what was it? I think she's telling the Sentinel, or was it, she says the safest downtown has ever been. We'll find the quote. And then you have this stuff where this stuff goes into the ground and we're fixing up this road and we're going to make it a festival street. And then 10 hours later, you've got a brawl that's all over social media that we've got some 100,000 plus views on already, and so do other people. What we hear from our leaders and what people feel on the ground is much different.
Right.
And when I see OPD or our administration say that we've got crime is down, violent crime is down, homicides, all this stuff is down. Yeah. And I'm not letting my family touch downtown after 8 p.m. Mm-hmm. So I think there's an and there. If we want to talk about nuance in this, I believe that people feel frustrated because they look at it and go, I know the feeling when I'm down there.
Yeah.
And it's not one of, I feel safe after a few drinks.
Yeah.
It's, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So for me, that's where that perception of reality is missing right now. On top of we're paying $5.2 million to knock down 300 feet of street. Okay, folks, what was that guy? Whoever sold this contract for that contractor, he must have just been cheersing at night going, what? I'm the best salesman in the world. All right.
Right.
For 300 feet of street from Garland to the railroad, we're doing 5.2 million.
Right.
For an eighth of a mile, we're doing 12.2 million. Whoa. $10,000 per square foot, we calculated this morning.
Wow.
Somebody's laughing all the way to the bank.
Well, and I have not a chance to look at those RFPs, but it sounds like I need to.
Please do.
To the heart of your question about the feeling, I think that's really, really important. So I live in Thornton Park, as I mentioned earlier, so I do walk downtown a lot. I actually choose to walk downtown when I have events, like a Dr. Phillips, for example. I'll try to leave early so I can walk. I can walk down Central. I can walk down all the main corridors.
Okay.
I also ride my bike through downtown a lot as well. Because one thing I always want to avoid as a leader, I call it the box syndrome.
Bubble,
So,
yeah.
Yes. Bubble is good too, but I use box because for me, it's the person who goes from their box at Dr. Phillips to their box at the Kia Center to their...
Oh, I get you. Okay.
Right? And they take their private car, they skip the TSA line, they have their parking spot in the garage, they walk the bridge on third floor into City Hall. So you're kind of shielded, right, from a lot of these experiences. And so I never want to be that girl that's shielded. Like, I always want to be on the ground, active, present. And when I walk downtown, I always run into people that I know or people that I need to know. And so I love doing that too, especially our bar owners. Like, I'll see Maddie, I'll just see folks doing their job and I'll pop in and be able to catch up. I never want to get caught up in that. And I try to ground myself to prevent it, because you do want to actively prevent it too. But yeah, the optics in reality is a problem. And I've already talked to some of the business owners about what can we do to also show folks what downtown can be. But again, like, our vision for downtown, our plan fits into 3 kind of buckets, and that's stabilize, supply, showcase. Okay. So, and we actually developed this not on our own. So we've been working with a lot of urban planners, architects, property owners, developers, urbanists, bicyclists, pedestrians. Like, this past year and a half that I've been technically on the campaign trail, we've just had a lot of amazing conversations. I actually did a charrette on downtown Orlando with a local planning company called Inspire Placemaking out of Baldwin Park. So we had maps and maps and maps looking at downtown. The maps focused on things like density, surface parking lots, water, bodies of water, and uses of buildings, vacancies. We also gathered data on the number of people that live downtown that do not work downtown compared to those that live and work downtown. And it's such a huge difference. Most folks who live downtown do not work downtown, and most folks who work downtown don't live downtown. That's why the traffic is bad, right? In and out of downtown. And we're not going to be able to solve the problems of downtown without a strong multimodal transit system, period. And that's why the Sun Realty Airport, I emphasized already, I do think that our bus system with a little bit of TLC, a little bit more money, can be transformational. we really have to fund links to a point where it can actually be functional. And I've taken links to the airport. I've taken links to different places when I don't have a tight schedule. But if you're trying to get somewhere for a job interview or to work, good luck, right? And for our Disney workers and our Universal workers, they have to leave 3-4 hours in advance on the bus system. And so that's, for me, there's so many surface parking lots right now, Patrick, that are owned by the county, especially by Lake Eola. And they're for employees. Like right now, we still need them because where will people park without it? But if we can convert our landscape to multimodal, we don't always have to drive in. That is prime real estate for more housing, more density, more infill. Because the more foot traffic we actually can have like home downtown, then the different types of businesses can open. Because ultimately, if you're retail, you're not going to open downtown if you have no customers. And so you got to build up the customer base. And the only way to do that is more foot traffic, i.e. more housing options downtown. Maybe we convert some commercial to residential and the high rises and so forth. But also that transit piece is really, really key. And I'm a firm believer in prioritizing residents and not just visitors. And I think that we've had a huge commitment to visitors for understandable reasons, but we've kind of lost track of the people that actually call and make Orlando home.
Okay, let me go back to a couple things I've written right here, okay?
Okay.
You scare me a little bit when you talk about housing options, talking to urbanists and urban planners, okay?
Tell me more.
This is the middle right part of me, okay? This is me,
Let me hear
the
it.
red.
Let me hear it.
When I hear that,
yeah.
I start thinking, what kind of foot traffic are we talking about, Anna? Or Representative Eskamani, I'm sorry.
You can call me Anna. It's fine. We're chill.
But what I'm looking at here, and I think where some people who are concerned about your administration would say, is fair. We need new housing. But what type of housing are we talking about putting downtown? If we're putting places that are affordable housing, their concern, I think, would be, okay, how do we fund a venue downtown, if we're talking about entertainment, with people that don't have the money to pay for it? And if we are putting those people downtown, are we inviting an area that people are not going to want to go, like a downtown Baltimore? All right? It's a great concept. And I like what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I like the concept of it.
Right.
I'm concerned about the execution of what type of people this brings downtown and the type of foot traffic that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
I'd love to. And
Okay.
I think it's so important, for us to try to humanize this as well, because I know there's stigma associated with affordable housing. And again, there are very valid and important dynamics there, like folks who are struggling with substance abuse that need help, folks with mental illness that need help. And our team does a lot of work with Homelessness Services Network. We actually volunteer to provide dinner service at Coalition for the Homeless. We're doing it again in a few Sundays. And it really gives you the chance to sit down and meet folks that are struggling with homelessness. And these are working people, right? Like the assumption that every person who is struggling with housing is not committed to finding a next chapter, right? I think it's important for us to be intentional in identifying a clear path for everyone. And to your point, you do not go from street to housing. That's never happened. Typically, if you're in the street, you go from street to shelter to transitional and then to permanent housing. And so for downtown, you want to really create workforce housing. I mean, you really want to think about teachers, firefighters, police, like those who they work in our city, but they can't afford to live in our city. Most of our officers and firefighters don't live in Orlando.
Live in Kissimmee, places like that.
Yeah. Yep. And that's our fault. I mean, I'm a firm believer that poverty is a policy decision, that we allow poverty to exist in this country, the richest country, the best country. We allow this to exist. And I am someone who, I hate poverty, but I love and care deeply about those who are in poverty. And I'm a woman of compassion, of commitment, and I really want to make sure that we're setting up people for success. And right now that's not the case, because for example, in my legislative office, I have folks that are doing everything right, like the woman I described earlier, everything right. They have 2 jobs. They pay taxes. They never missed a bill, and they're one paycheck, one crisis away from eviction. And so, when I talk about talking to really for urbanism, for me, what that means is that we're not anti-development, but we're pro smart growth, because I don't want to sprawl. I don't want to see what is, Florida is known for its natural resources, and we are paving all of it, and I don't want that. And I also think that communities that are transit friendly and communities that are environmentally friendly have growth, but in a vertical way versus horizontal. And we have so much infill, so many opportunities to build up versus build out. And so for me, it's really thinking about that working class Orlandonian, that if they had an apartment that was affordable and they weren't rent burdened, they could go see a show at the Social. They could go see a show at one of our venues. And by the way, this is a separate topic, but I do think that we need to be more intentional with our city-owned venues and making them affordable for city residents. Okay. And these are taxpayer-funded venues, right? Mm-hmm. They do generate revenue as well. But if you pay taxes in Orlando, you should get the option of discount tickets, because I also think that the working class should have fun. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be able to engage in the same activities that others are engaging with. And the reality is that today people can't afford that. Literally, they cannot afford it. And when we see, like, not to go on my soapbox with, Live Nation and ticketing monopolies, like a whole different topic, but I'm really worried that there is no middle class anymore, that you just have the working poor and the wealthy. And like, where's the middle, right? And where's your path to get there? And so for me, it's about building back up that middle class. And there's a reason why the middle class can't live downtown. And there's no reason why the middle class can't have exceptional income to spend downtown.
Okay, so me and you are going to disagree on something, and then I want to turn to that, actual how you build this, okay?
For sure.
And forgive me, everybody. I want you to know I think it's rude what I'm doing. I'm writing down notes while you're speaking. And if you've ever been in an interview or something like that, it sucks because you never know what the other person's writing down. You're like, what would I just say that they're writing down? Okay, so believe me, it doesn't get past me. For those of you,
I'm chill.
I do it. I hate it.
He's
I hate it. I hate doing it. So I hate doing it to you. But let's you and I disagree on something here, because I want to be fair to my listening audience and fair to you for you to give your opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned something, intervention versus incarceration, a minute ago. Okay.
It.
I've said before that if I was mayor, which I never will because I can't even qualify. Okay. So I live in Winter Park, everybody. I don't qualify.
Oh my God, what part of Winter Park?
So I live next to here I am. I just moved.
LOL.
So
breaking news.
The taco. What is Los Gringos?
Oh yeah.
I live right next to there.
Okay.
So I live about 100 yards from Ringo's Tacos. That little street right there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. It's a nice location. I go to the Foxtail Coffee over there in the mornings.
I totally know where you're at. Yeah.
So I'm like one
great.
street over right there. From
I work out in that area.
Yeah, it's great. So
yeah.
I really enjoy being there right now.
That's cool.
So here we go.
Okay.
Intervention versus incarceration. All right. Patrick Carr was fake mayor. Okay, and they said, "Hey, listen, Pat, you've got OPD. First thing I'm doing is incarcerating the hell out of people." Okay. And now we're going to disagree here. Okay.
No, go on. Okay. I'm curious. Go on.
Here's the reason why. I firmly believe that people get the point when you show a force of strength.
Okay.
And I believe there are people who need intervention, but that's not the people that are in our downtown streets causing problems.
Okay.
I believe those people are out there, all right? I believe that what's happening in our streets, and you're there maybe even more than what I am because I don't go down there as much. You're right, you're walking.
Yeah.
I believe a show of force downtown to say, we're not going to put up with this anymore, the underage. We're not going to tolerate it anymore. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell why intervention is better or maybe the better option.
Yeah.
And then maybe you and I could come to an agreement. I'm not trying to lead here.
That
not all of – I'm not talking about 2 p.m. in the afternoon on a Tuesday.
Right.
I'm talking about this time that people think about downtown on the weekends,
Yeah.
I'm talking about a show of force there to say, let's clean up the street.
Yeah.
We may disagree on this one. I want to
Let's unpack it because we actually might agree a little bit.
All
I mean, if you have a gun and you're swinging it around like that guy was doing, arrest that man, 100%.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who is struggling with mental illness and you are on the ground and you're homeless, I don't think that person should be arrested at first cause. Like, I feel like there should be an intervention, get them to a place of help, but I don't think that person should be arrested. I don't think you should be arrested for being poor. But if you're acting up, if you're, breaking a law, if you're being violent, then 100% arrest that person. Now, the one dynamic when it comes to, I'm like super responsible. Like, I've never had a fake ID. I've actually never been drunk before. Like, I'm a
Me
very
either.
responsible person in that sense. Part of it is because my mom passed away when I was a kid, and I always just feel like she's watching and judging me, and I have to behave, you know? But I'm the Eskamani. Like,
You call her your angel mother, I believe, right?
She's my angel mother.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. And so I'm your DD. Like, I am the girl that's going to be like, let me get you home safe. Like, that is me. But with that said, like, you know, should a 16-year-old that, you know, gets into a bar, even if they're not drinking, but they're not supposed to be there, should I arrest that 16-year-old, or should I get them to their parent and let the parent deal with it? Like, I think there are some nuanced cases where, do I potentially ruin this kid's life for making a dumb decision? Like, I think I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
Arrest him.
Okay.
So
yeah. I mean, I think
I
I want to trust law enforcement to make those decisions because I'm not a cop. You know what I mean? So part of it is like, I want my officers to make those calls. And, you know, granted, there's a reason why we have a juvenile justice system, but it's just so broken. And I do worry about if we don't have the right approach to the punishment, that you do more harm than good, and you cost the system more down the line. But again, when it comes to like any type of behavior that is, you know, you smash a window, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you cause property damage or physical damage to a person, and you're carrying a firearm you should not be carrying. You're underage, carrying a firearm. I mean, that's been some of the shootings, or people that are literally not even allowed to carry a firearm. The second you see that, you arrest that person. You know, I've also had discussion with the city about, you know, trying to find ways in the parking garages to patrol better, because a lot of this stuff also comes out of the parking garages, right?
Yes, it does.
And so yeah, like, I don't want to give off the impression that I don't think we should arrest anyone. For me, it's like people that are poor, that are downtown. I'm a firm believer that you cannot criminalize people out of homelessness. But if you're downtown with the intention of causing problems and breaking the law, then absolutely. I mean, when we did the ride-along with OPD, I'll give you an example, right? There was this guy that was on a motorcycle, and he was zigging and zagging really recklessly. And so a decision was being debated, do we chase him or not? And it was kind of dangerous to chase this guy in the tight quarters downtown. So a decision was made not to do it, right? So it's those type of judgment calls of like, is it safe to do this, or would it actually be more dangerous if I did it? Funny story, though, that night we found that bike later in the day, or later in the evening, hidden in a corner. And so we were able to, you know, find a pathway to accountability anyways. But it was one of those tough calls that the lieutenant had to make, where he was like, kind of, you know, it's ironic, bad cop, good cop, but he had to kind of be the backup to the younger guys and say, don't chase.
Yeah.
And that was his call, because he looked how crowded downtown was. And then if you chase this guy, right?
We saw in Ybor City. Ybor City had that instance.
Exactly. So that's what I mean. So I really want to be clear, because I know sometimes Democrats get labeled like soft on crime, and, you know, Republicans get seen as hard on crime. And for me, I think there's always truth in the middle, where it's like some situations require the full book. Absolutely. My twin sister and her the four juveniles that were the defendants in this case, like, we threw the book at them, because it was really important for my sister that there be a path of justice and accountability. And her victim impact statement, she spoke directly to each one of those young men and said, I know you can do better, right? Mm-hmm. Now, granted, the juvenile justice system, the full book, the problem we have is that it's not as heavy in cases as it should be. Yeah. And that's why, unfortunately, you see a lot of young people just repeat this pathway until they get tried as adults, and then their lives are ruined completely because they ruined someone else's life. And this is why that prevention piece is so important to me, mm-hmm. because I don't want to see a 17-year-old come downtown with a firearm. We messed up. Like, how did that happen? Like, we should be asking ourselves that question of, like, how did a 17-year-old go downtown with a gun in the first place? Like, where did we mess up in providing support for that child when they were born? And that's why one of the programs I also really want to see championed is more childcare services, because we know in 0 to 4 that if children have access to high quality education at that age, and of course it lets their parents go back to work and add back to our economy, but childcare services can really set a child up for success. If they learn how to read at a young age, that absolutely impacts their risk of criminality. And so again, for me, it is also about that preventative piece versus just reacting after the fact.
Okay. I think what happened is that we got to a point where that 17-year-old felt it was acceptable for them to do that, and that the cost of doing that, in other words, the penalty that they would have to pay, was not as great.
Yeah.
And so they weighed their option in their 17-year-old head and said, coolness or toughness of bringing firearm downtown versus I can get a slap on the wrist in our system right now. And this is, to me, where I want to distinguish between how I feel about homeless versus how I feel about the kid who just wants to go down there, drink out of a Solo cup, loiter, vagrancy, and catcall and fights in that kid. I have no sympathy for that son of a gun. Who I do have sympathy for is somebody that is dealing with the streets, okay? I've told people this just so everyone's aware of how I stand. I believe everybody in this world is 3 circumstances or situations from being where that person is.
Totally.
And if you're unable to see the empathy in that, then you just haven't lived, okay? You don't understand how quickly you can lose a business or a wife or go through something that you mentally can't handle. And so I have a lot of empathy for that. I don't believe that's the problem at night in their entertainment district. I see it as being a bunch of people that are irresponsible, that need a heavy hand to go, we're not going to accept this anymore. I think what I'm asking for from you is, okay, I understand where your position is. I can meet you on this one.
And I can meet you on that one too.
Okay.
Yeah, to be clear, I can meet you on that one too. Especially if they're return offenders, right?
Yeah.
Something has to intervene, and in that case, intervene might be incarceration, right? Now, I want to highlight the point you just made about the punishment in those situations not being strong enough. So one of the bills that we've actually tried to work on legislature, we haven't gotten through yet, unfortunately, but it is to create some more teeth in the juvenile justice system for these types of cases, because the reality is that we do have state attorneys, and understandably so, right? Because if you've ever visited a state prison, which I visited many state prisons, I can do so unannounced, and I take that responsibility seriously. It's not necessarily an environment where a 16-year-old can be reformed. And so the challenge is that if you do send a teenager to an adult prison, they sometimes get worse, because our prisons have, I mean, this is a larger issue, but we have drug problems in the prisons. We have a lack of correctional officers in the prison. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed a bill that eliminated pay increases for correctional officers, which will make the situation even more challenging. But at the same time, for some of these cases, the juvenile justice system does not have enough tools. And so when you try a violent 16, 17-year-old as a juvenile, there is not a path of actual rehabilitation, because there's just not enough time in the juvenile justice system for how long you actually are in and I have toured not just the juvenile detention center, but also these extended facilities for juveniles that, are going to be in a place of detainment longer. And so it's important for us to give more options to judges and to prosecutors, and we don't have that right now. So I'm really hopeful legislature will create some more pathways, because you're right. There's actually, it's heartbreaking, but a lot of adults will take advantage of this and leverage juveniles to do something on their behalf because of just how fast they can get back out. And that's a shame, because those adults are not good role models and they're exploiting our young people. And so, I definitely want to express my solidarity on that point.
Look at us. What am I, a Republican over here? And we meet in the middle on it, okay? I'm fine with that, okay? I agree there should be more options for youth. If we can agree, hey, listen, you know what? Sometimes you need to have a little bit of the heavy hand of the law. I can work with you on that one.
Yeah, totally.
We've seen in Orange County where they've reduced the ICE hold time from 72 hours down to 48 hours.
Right.
The governor has said that we have as a state to cooperate with ICE.
Right.
I agree with that. Cool. I would like understand your perspective. Violent crimes that are committed by somebody who is illegally here. I want to see that person behind bars without an opportunity for parole before they have the opportunity to see ICE.
I support that 100%.
Okay.
Right now the process, if you are arrested, whatever the crime is, you first have those domestic charges, and you have to go through the domestic charges before you are transferred over to ICE. And so, if you are accused of a violent crime and you are charged with a violent crime, and typically you serve your time first, so you're sentenced to X years in prison.
Cool.
You typically do serve your prison time unless the sentence says otherwise. Maybe the sentence is deportation, but usually you serve prison time first before that deportation order goes into effect. But I think that's something that majority of folks across the aisle agree with, and I think obviously the tension and the disagreement has to do with what you described. like just everyday folks that are working in our communities. They're paying taxes. They have the only issue that they have is this status on immigration, which we want everyone to do things, quote, the right way. Mm-hmm. But we're just not creating enough pathways for that. And like one of the issues right now that we've been dealing with is for our dreamers, our students who were brought to this country at no decision of their own, and they don't have status because their parents didn't have status, and they go to our public schools, and then they are strong performing students. They want to go to college. And the state of Florida is now banning their ability to even apply and go to a state college. And next they're going to ban their ability to go to a state university. And they're paying out-of-state tuition, so they're not getting any discount. They don't qualify for most scholarships, especially no public scholarships either. So these are hardworking students that don't have status, again, no fault of their own. And now they're being barred from going to our same colleges and universities, even open enrollment colleges that don't have, caps, if you will. So for me in those situations, like, why can't we just let kids learn? Why can't we just let kids add to our economy? And why don't we give them an actual pathway to citizenship? There's no pathway available. And that's obviously on Congress, not on the state. But kids in those situations, when they become adults, they still don't have a clear path to citizenship unless they marry someone, right? And then that couple can try to apply. Unless they're the victim of a crime, then you maybe can get a visa through that. But the pathway to do any type of defining regulated status becomes really narrow for people without even that being their fault.
We're going to agree on something right here, but see if you can work with me on this, okay? Here we go. State colleges. First of all, crappy way to do it. We couldn't get it pushed through in legislation. You championed this fact that if we can't get this kind of stuff pushed through in legislation, let's not let a board go on a phone call and get this done.
Right.
Now, producer Anthony, I want to give him credit for this over here because he was so right about this. We did a story about this. Can you agree with me on this?
Yeah, let me hear
All right.
it.
See, state colleges. I think it's a crappy way to not let people, the 8,000 kids that are going to graduate from Florida in 2027, 2028 in the state, not have the opportunity to go to a state college.
Yeah.
And I believe that those same kids should not have the opportunity at state-funded scholarships. Mm-hmm. That is my opinion. If you want to go pay for your own way to be there, go pay for your own way to be there.
Right.
My opinion is that when we have taxpayer money going into a fund, that needs to go to citizens of the U.S.
Right, and that's been the status. They've never qualified for public scholarships.
That's where I think it needs to stay.
Yeah.
And so for me, when we took another step forward here and we go, hold on, we can't go to Hillsborough Community College or Valencia right now. You're gonna bar somebody from enrolling. Who is that helping?
Yeah.
It's not helping that young man or woman. It's not helping the community that we're in right now.
Right.
There is no reason except for, hey, listen, I don't want taxpayer funds to go to that person, that we do something like that.
Right.
I didn't agree with how it was done, and I don't agree with the policy. And I don't think many right-wing Republicans look at that and go, yeah, that's really going to work out well for us. That's really well thought out. That right there is a talking point to be like, look at us, we're hard on immigration, without thinking through the actual problem itself.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, and I have to tell you too, Patrick, like I know a lot of these kids. I mean, I've had the honor of meeting many dreamers over the years, and these are some of the hardest working students. And I want to give flowers to many of those private foundations. In fact, maybe a year and a half ago, I got a call from a gentleman who runs a nonprofit for Oak Ridge High School. And he reached out to me because he had 2 students that, again, merit-based scholarships. They qualify for these private scholarships, but UCF was not accepting one student. And Valencia wasn't accepting, I think it was Seminole State College, wasn't accepting the other student. And fortunately, this was before these changes went into effect, but I was able to call both institutions and figure it out and remind them, like, hey, that bill didn't pass. Like, they can still come in. And they were Venezuelan asylum seekers. So they were not dreamers per se, but they came on asylum with pending cases. So they followed everything correctly, right? They're pending. So they're still going through the legal process, but they're both Oak Ridge High School grads, they're brother and sister. And so fortunately, we were able to get that clarified, and they got enrolled, and they were fine. My parents really instilled in me just the importance of education because they sacrificed so much. My parents fled Iran to be here. And so they sacrificed so much for me to be in this country that I never took a second for granted. And that's the story for so many of our immigrant kids. And to lock away their ability to contribute to a society that they feel so proud of being in, Like, I don't know what's more American than that, right? Hard work. It breaks my heart because I know a lot of these kids and they don't deserve to be caught in the political crossfire. There's plenty of fights for us to have, but I just feel like this one should be a lot more simpler.
Yeah, this is a dumb move this week. I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
I don't like the way it was done, like a phone call. We're going to do a vote.
And they gave each one of us a minute to testify.
Don't do that crap.
And no one even debated, Patrick. When they were asked to any debate on this rule, silence. No. Silence. You can't even give us a description or an explanation of why you support this, right? I mean, it's just, yeah.
Undocumented residents getting attorney help, that screams to me that you have money that's going into this budget that's going into attorneys helping people that are not here legally. And if I am sitting there in my, I guess I'm not City of Orlando, but let's just say I was in Orlando and I'm paying into this. I'm like, come on, we don't need, if they're not here legally and we're helping them navigate this thing, I feel like there's better use of the funds.
For me, it's about legal aid. Just so you have a right to an attorney in criminal matters, but not in civil matters. And I do think it's important that people of working class who can't afford an attorney have access to legal aid. That's. I mean, I can probably word that better, to be honest, but that's my intention. And when it comes,
what's the difference? Legal aid and attorneys. Are we talking the same thing here?
We have legal aid organizations. Okay. So we have the Orange County Bar Legal Aid Society, and then we have Community Legal Services. And they do a lot of work with very little, but that's basically what they do is they provide pro bono legal services to folks who face eviction, folks who have DV challenges, and need civil changes with their maybe family law issues, so forth. So no criminal, they just do civil. And the reality is that civil justice to the courts are often limited by how much money you have. And so for me, it's just making sure that you have access to just basic civil representation. Now, to your point, legal aid is not going to pick up a case they can't really win. So if you go to legal aid and you say, I didn't pay my rent, I want a lawyer, you're not going to get a lawyer. But if you go to legal aid and say, I paid my rent, my landlord said I didn't, or I signed this contract that says I pay next month and he is now evicting me because I didn't pay this month, the contract says otherwise, then you get an attorney. But yeah, you shouldn't just get an attorney for anything. But legal aid, the two main groups in Orlando, my thought process is that we would provide sources of revenue for them, and it doesn't have to be from the city budget. Maybe we apply for a grant together to bring legal aid, and maybe the city provides some administrative coverage for it, right? We have to remember that in this budget are also employees, so it doesn't always mean there's direct money being aligned, if you will, like a blank check. It can also be, we provide you with administrative support for this program, or we refer to these programs in a 24/7 hotline for community services that Orlando helps to run. So really my hope is that if you have a legitimate civil matter and the difference between you winning your case or not having a case as a lawyer, that you can get access to a pro bono lawyer or a low bono, whatever legal aid can do, because obviously they are going to be faced with their own fiscal restraints.
Yeah, because I think people like me, like my audience, looks at it when they see that, they go, "Come on, Mayor Eskamani, more free stuff for people. Come on, more free stuff. We don't want to give away more."
Yeah.
That's what they're seeing when they're not going to read your platform like I did. But I think that's what they're saying. And so first of all, thank you. I can understand your perspective there.
Right.
My perspective is if somebody is trying to rent a unit out to someone and they get that prolonged 4 months that they've got to keep somebody in there.
Right.
That sucks because you're
and
trying to.
And there's bad tenants too, right? Just as there can be problematic landlords and be problematic tenants as well. So I empathize with that point too. And you don't want to you want to make sure that again these things are not abused, and so you would want a lawyer to vet that case and not just automatically help someone, which legal aid doesn't do that. Like we work really closely with, like I said, both legal aid in Orange County and the Community Legal Services, which services almost half the state. And there's a lot of cases they say no to because they look at this person's case and are like, I'm not going to help you. Ethically, I cannot help you. You don't have a case, right? And so, and I can definitely provide clarity on that too, because at the end of the day, resources, especially if property tax referendum passes, a lot of, this platform was written under current circumstances. I am going to craft a scenario.
You have a long time.
Right. I mean, we have time to figure it out, but to be very transparent, we got to be realistic to what the voters will say and what those budgets look like. And so I may be inheriting a budget that looks very different, where a third of it's gone, and we have to get creative of how to fill those gaps for some of the essentials like police and fire.
I want to be very delicate in how I ask this question because it's a delicate subject. I want to talk about abortion with you.
Okay.
Because you were part of Planned Parenthood from 2012 through 2018. I'm an advocate for pro-life. You're an advocate for pro-choice, okay? We're two people sitting across the table from one another.
I love it.
And this is unfortunately not a question that I think between two people who might disagree gets talked about more often. It's always just on a floor with people grandstanding, right? I remember the first time I went to Planned Parenthood, I had a friend of mine. I was 28, I want to say at the time. She had called me and said she had to have an abortion. She was early, first trimester. For those people, I'm not sure if it's still this way.
Yeah.
But she called me and said, I need some support. So I pick her up and we go to Planned Parenthood down the downtown area. Kind of was at that time kind of behind downtown is the best way.
Tampa Avenue.
Okay, is that what it is?
Yeah, on Tampa Avenue.
We get there and there's groups of people, probably about 50 people outside. I want to say it was a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Because for those of you not aware, at that time they did abortions at a certain time. All right, and so these groups knew that.
Right.
And so as you're walking in, she's already, distraught. We're saying the same word.
Yeah.
And I'm walking in here, and I feel like I'm probably about 290. I was bodybuilding at the time. I mean, I was pretty hot-headed. And I remember I wanted their blood all over them. They've got signs that are just awful. I mean, it's just a really terrible situation. Okay.
Right.
So I go in there, and the people who were in there could see that I was visibly upset. Like I was gonna go kick somebody. I was gonna be a scene. I was gonna get arrested.
Right.
There was a police officer who happened to be there who told me, "Do not do it."
Yeah.
He goes, "I'm gonna have no choice, and they want you to do that."
I wonder if it was Miss Monica.
So it was very.
Yeah.
That was a extremely difficult thing for me because I remember thinking I am such a pro-life person, but I'm also supporting a friend who is going through I could see just a traumatizing scenario. So now I've got that.
Right.
Then I'm dealing with person over here who, in my opinion, doesn't represent how I feel. I don't think that's the way, if there is a God, that God wants us to act, okay?
Right.
I don't agree with that.
Right.
And so I felt myself in this catch-22 conundrum of feeling that I still have not wrapped my head around.
Yeah.
Okay?
Totally.
And so I know that, I know for me, pro-life is something that I am.
Yeah.
But I also can understand that there's a 6-week rule that doesn't seem to make sense to me. All right? And I do think that 8 months and 6 weeks, there's a big difference. And I don't know where that is or why it is that way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm right or I got it figured out.
Yeah.
But Lord, there's got to be I've got so much nuance, and this is why I debated to ask you this question, okay? Because you're seeing a different side of me that is I'm normally much more intense, but this is one that I wanted to just ask you about because you've had a lot of experience in this area. I'd like to know what do you feel? Not that it's Orlando's mayor's job, but but it's been a big part of your life in advocacy. And I hope you can see I'm coming at this from an honest place. And I think that I want to know, and maybe voters want to know where you stand on this. But if nothing else, I personally do. Yeah. Maybe you can even shed some light on what's going through my head.
I mean, I think you're actually coming from a really beautiful place. And I think it's a place of complexity that a lot of people share on this issue, because there can be a lot of folks that identify as pro-life, but when faced with a difficult situation with a friend or a loved one or their children, they will be there in a heartbeat for that person. And I thank you for being there for her, because no person makes a decision to end a pregnancy lightly. No. Nobody's thinking this is a form of birth control, despite the rhetoric around that. It's a last decision to make. And I'm a firm believer that whether you choose to become a parent and raise a child, or you choose adoption, or you choose to end that pregnancy, that you make that decision with yourself, your loved ones, your doctor, and your God, not politicians and not those protesters that are outside. And I have to tell you that some of my most tender moments working at Planned Parenthood was exactly what you just described. I mean, I might have been out there when you were out there with the volunteers. We would have health center escorts that would walk people from their cars to their front doors to keep them safe and to also protect their privacy, because sometimes they'd be taking photos and stuff like that.
That was happening.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you that I think if you're a person of faith, that's not the right approach. You know, if you want others to agree with your faith, then you should practice it. And that's a really bad way to practice it in my eyes. But ultimately, I think we all can agree that we want to reduce the rate of abortion. And the only way to do that is through, I mean, the science speaks for itself, the data speaks for itself, is comprehensive, preventative, age-appropriate reproductive health education, access to contraception and education on that. And of course, making sure that people know where they can go when there is a situation of crisis. And I always tell myself, too, that I'm not in her shoes. I don't know what she's going through. But what I can do is provide a safe, non-judgmental space to figure it out. And there was many, many cases in I worked at Planned Parenthood where somebody would come in for an appointment, but then change their mind. And then we would give them their ultrasound so they can go apply for Medicaid. So I think it's important to know, too, that speaking of my work at Planned Parenthood, it's one of the most compassionate organizations. It's an organization that operates with the utmost of ethics because of course, our values, but also the scrutiny. I mean, it's one of the most regulated medical procedures in the country. And ACA comes by with spontaneous inspections multiple times a month. And so you really got to make sure that you're doing everything to the T. And to your point about 6 weeks, most people don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks.
I agree.
And I think there's a reason why 57% of Floridians voted to pass Amendment 4, which was last cycle, that would have codified access to an abortion up to viability. And that's kind of where I think a lot of folks express more comfort. But arguably, the sooner someone can identify their pregnancy, then the better, right? Because it just gives you more time to figure out what your options are. But I'm also really sensitive to those who they have pregnancies that they actually did plan, and they get a diagnosis that is devastating. Mm-hmm. And the state of Florida has created a landscape where for women in those situations, they sometimes have to go to other states because a doctor's not comfortable providing with a procedure here, despite the fact that they have a diagnosis of a pregnancy is no longer viable. And that's heartbreaking, because at the very least, you should let doctors make those decisions, not doctors have to call in lawyers to decide what to do with this patient. And so I hope that your friend is doing well. I hope that she has found, it sounds like she has system support. I hope that continues. And I hope she knows that she's valued and loved, and that she does. Every person, every woman deserves the ability to make their own decisions on that. And I'm grateful that she had a friend in you that she can call on, because it's very, very difficult. And I mean, there would be situations with, 16-year-olds who came with their moms and dads, right? And it's a situation nobody wants to be in. And it's important to share those stories, because I think it gets stigmatized if we don't. But the state of reproductive rights in Florida is one of the worst in the country. And granted, as mayor, that's not my silo, right? Like my responsibilities shift dramatically. But I do think the heart of that work, continues, and just my compassion for others. And I actually am hopeful to do more in the public health silo as mayor. Like I think there's a lot more we can do to educate the public, to make sure that we're collaborating on preventative programs like drowning prevention and other types of health programs. So hopefully pieces of it can come with me. But yeah, it's definitely foundational to who I am, and I do appreciate you uplifting it.
Yeah, I'm going to end it. I'm going to end there. Okay, I'm not going to ask, because there's no way to transition off that topic. Okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
But for me, I've become pro-life. I am in my life, of the course of the last 20 some odd years. As I've gotten out of being a teenager, 39 now, and in the course of that, my thoughts have changed. My viewpoints have changed. I'm not a religious person. Okay. Right. So I always just tell people, like, you're right in your perspective of empathy for an individual. Mm-hmm. The people that I know that have gone through that process they don't take it lightly. And people say, well, they shouldn't take it lightly. And it's so easy to crush that person, okay?
Yeah.
And I get that. I get why. And I understand the religious side and the value of life. And I do understand all of those things. But the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because I myself have nuance with it. And then I look at it and I go, well, then, Patrick, you know what? Who the heck are you, right? You don't know that feeling. You don't understand it. And so I'm trying to be, while I have my beliefs, I'm also trying to be understanding and empathetic of what someone else might be going through that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I think we all would do a lot better to have more empathy.
Yeah.
Now, the city of Orlando and the way that it's been run for the past however many years, I don't have a lot of empathy for. Been a pleasure meeting you. I thought we found some middle ground. We didn't get to everything. Okay, you got 20. For those of you who don't know, we will put your website, everything. Go there. You've got 28 different sections.
We're actually trying to like summarize it.
Yeah,
better.
could you do that for me next time? Okay, because I'm sitting there clicking through each one.
An abridged version.
So go check her out. It's Anna Eskamani. She's been in the house for 8 years. Thank you for coming by here today. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate it. Okay,
Patrick. It was a
we'll see you all next time. Patrick Carr Show. Thank you.